Welcome to episode 75. I cannot believe it, 75 of Silver Lining for Learning. We've been doing this for 75 weeks. And today is Chris Didi's birthday. Well, it's not exactly today, so we're happy birthday to Chris. And I forgot when my birthday was, maybe a few weeks ago. I think everyone has a birthday. So congratulations, happy birthday. One more year made. We've earned that, okay? Today is our host reflection. We've had a lot of issues. We can talk about really what's happening in education today when everybody's busy returning to normal, when there is absolutely no normal right now. And also what happened during the last year and a half about learning. Punya wants to talk about learning loss. We also want to talk about technological changes and also the people behind technology, which Christine wants to chat about. So I just want to say happy birthday and let you guys go first. Chris, do you want to get started? Since it's your birthday, you get a chance.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And just to clarify, I'm in stage 3 of birthday celebrations. So stage 1 is when you're young and you're really excited and happy to have another birthday. And stage 2 is when you're middle-aged and you're horrified to have another birthday. And stage 3 is when you're just grateful to still be around. So I'm back to the celebrating birthdays rather than being horrified by them. So the rest of you hopefully will get to stage 3 and have a similar experience. So I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about in this particular reflection, and I've realized, and I'm using Silver Lining for Learning now in my teaching. So I'm, picking episodes, discussing them with the students, excerpting parts of each to get the highlights. And it struck me that when I think about episodes, I do remember that they're about terrific educational models and innovative solutions, but I remember them by the people. I don't remember them by the models. And some of the people have been so inspirational. I just feel humbled even to have them on the show. And it just underscores again that you can have the world's greatest technology and it's not going to make a difference unless it's implemented and evolves because of really skilled, dedicated, smart people who will go the extra mile to make it work. And they're so committed to their students that they will do what it takes. And I think one of the things that I feel proudest about in terms of Silver Lining for Learning is that we've been able to recognize some people that have been pretty unsung, really, within the EdTech community. And I'm just, whenever I despair about the world, which is more than usual these days, given everything that's happening, I think about some of the guests we've had on Silver Lining for Learning, and I feel better that there are people like that. And so one of the questions that raises for me, sorry, I've taken a while to get to the punchline, is we think a lot in the field about how to develop technologies. How do we develop people that in the field that have the kind of dedication, student-centeredness, humility, resilience that we're seeing in many of our guests? Because that would really step up the game of what we're all trying to do in capacity building in the field. So that's my rumination for the day.
Well, thanks, Chris.
So
One of the things
I need to jump in on what Chris has said, and I think Punya does too, because he said some important things. Punya, why don't you go first?
So thank you, Chris, for saying that, because, and I was thinking of just even last Saturday's episode. And you spoke about that as well at the end of that episode, I remember, Chris. But I also want to say on your birthday that you have been one of those people for all of us. So thank you for that, and being a guiding light and an inspiration. So happy birthday, and glad that you are here with us, and having with that for 75 weeks now we've been having this conversation. It's been very meaningful. I mean, my entire family knows that everything on Saturday, no plans on Saturday get made if it doesn't include SLL. That's everybody. Nobody calls it silver lining anymore. It's like, oh, you have SLL today. What time is SLL? Oh, we can go for dinner after that. We can do X before that. So it's been a wonderful journey. And speaking of people who have been influential, I think you have been one of those. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I'm not done yet either.
I know you're not, but still, it's thank you for all that you've done so far.
Thank you.
Kurt,
I have to unmute here. So, you bring to mind what else can we do, right? With the people that we've brought in before, can we have some kind of repeat performance, but not exactly, such as bringing back a panel of some of the top guests so they get to meet each other, or maybe having 2 weeks of back-to-back where we bring 3 or 4 previous, maybe 3 previous guests, and have another week we bring 3 previous guests, and we have them spin off ideas against one another and share with each other what they're doing to cross-pollinate some of those ideas. That would be one thing. Or we could, we won't want to do this, but we could try kind of a little silver lining for learning symposium where we'd have kind of a back-to-back guests come in, like a 3-hour symposium instead of just 1 hour. Just have take a whole bunch of people and bring them back that way. 3 1 hour, 3 another 3, and that kind of a memory. Another idea that we could do is have a silver lining for learning kind of award, up and coming, as well as a silver-haired silver lining for learning award. So
Well, wait! Don't disqualify Punya here.
Yeah, the bearded one. Yeah. So we could have things. I just finished a book that was going to be called Making Impact, and I was thinking a volume 2 of the book could be all the people from Silver Lining, getting 40 such people to write mini stories of how they're changing the world, and having you all co-edit a book with me. That's the first one's called Transformative Teaching Around the World. Could be something else, but we're bringing 30, 40 authors from Italy and from Australia and from Israel and all these, Brazil and all these places we've had people, and it'd be kind of transforming education around the world. So that's another idea I've had, or an institute, or just T-shirts made, something. But I agree with you about the people. I mean, a lot of them have just blown my socks off, or just last week in particular, as we pointed out, Kendam's so vibrant and so full of really wise ideas for such a young age. She's got such a real keen insight into the world, and I hope we can find more people like that and bring them in. So I'll stop blabbering here and let Young add to that.
Well, I was going to add one thing, because during my conversations over the last few weeks and months, we need to recognize there is a general perception and perhaps reality that many educators are distressed, are living through anxiety, are unhappy. The pandemic has affected. And I honestly myself did not believe that until recently. I've met a number of people that truly feel less positive. I think I'm kind of a strange guy. I love to be on Zoom, but no more than 55 minutes, maybe an hour. It's just, I just kind of enjoyed this, so I want to see what Chris said is the uniqueness of all these people who, regardless of the pandemic and isolation and all these negative things, have thrived in doing what they do, in making innovations. I think that's a strong element, because right now we do have a lot of people, mental issues are significant in education. And this is, and even though when you're home, you don't know when this pandemic might strike you, your students, your friends, your families, you don't know. So that uncertainty is there. Like, China, for example, who claims to be the country that has controlled the pandemic the best, it can never truly wipe out the disease. Every few days later, boom, something come up. So that is a very challenging. So what Chris said, it's quite amazing. Maybe the four of us sitting here generally look happier, maybe because of the silver lining for learning. So this is more of a therapy for us.
That's an interesting thought, that this is our weekly therapy session with three others,
Well, this is like the AA, right? And you come down and say, hey, I'm Punya, I've been drinking, so what's going on with that? That is the story. I don't know if, Chris, you want to respond to any of these things. If not, we can move on to another topic to reflect.
Well, I think that, and I think I've said this before, I've been thinking a lot about dispositions, how there's knowledge and skills, but then there's your ability to use your knowledge and skills under different kinds of adverse situations, which depends more on your disposition. And I wonder if, as a field, we shouldn't be stressing that more. We graduate people with degrees in ed tech that are based on their ability to design and their ability to evaluate and their knowledge of the range of educational technologies, all of which are important. But I'm not criticizing what we're doing. I'm wondering if there's something missing where we want to turn out people who are resilient and dedicated in a way that's inspirational for others. And I say that not knowing exactly how to do that other than by modeling, which is what our guests are doing for us. But I feel as if somehow we need to increase the pipeline of people like our guests, if there's any way we can figure out to do that.
Thanks, Chris. Punya and Kurt, you want to respond?
I'm good.
Just going to say that our field, I go to a conference called AECT that not everybody goes to. It's gotten better over time, but they've tended to emphasize the experienced people in the field who have made a difference and highlight them every year at, on special sessions. And I've been pushing, to have more sessions on young leadership within the field and so forth. And I think that can be something that we highlight or spotlight if we have a series of shows with mid-career, early career people that then other professors in ed tech start using in their classes. They'll have role models. I'm using these videos in my class this semester in one of my 2 classes. And in a couple of different, they're both optional, a couple of different assignments actually I've made for them. And I've heard from others. Remember, we've had a couple of people during the keynote session say, I'm using this in my classes and so forth. At Maryland, I think, for instance, at one person. And so we could have maybe 4 or 5 or 6, rising stars within the field, or, people who like Kendom who are, have been impactful at a young age. I think that would be good for both the new people in the field, especially for females, entering the field, which is really important.
Kurt, I heard you say you wanted the young leadership or young leadership.
Both.
Okay, you don't need to make me up. I don't. Doesn't matter. Okay.
So I want to segue a little bit from what Chris was talking about. So I think there are 2 things here that increasingly I have become sort of sensitive to. The first one is, Chris, what you said, which is people who are resilient, people who see a crisis as a possible opportunity, so on and so forth, right? Or they just bounce back. I mean, it's, I mean, if you look at some of the context within which Kendram is working, those are like, you're really looking at 2,000-year entrenched systems that you're trying to go against. And so that brings me to the second piece. I think the people who have been most impressive to me in our guests over the past 70 whatever episodes, minus our hosts' reflections, have been people who are thinking at the level of systems rather than thinking. So I'm thinking of, for instance, Zhao, the guest that we had, who were looking at, I don't remember the names of the people now, but the ones that you can take classes from different schools. Which one was that?
Global Online Academy.
Right. So now what they're doing is, now it's a completely different system that they're designing, which allows, and I think that's the other big takeaway for me. And that's sort of, I think, Zhao, one of the topics you wanted to talk about was, that whether the pandemic, our job, as teacher educators in particular, is to be preparing the teachers for the next generation of schools, or preparing them to do well in the systems that we already have, right? And so to me, the people who are very interesting are the ones who are sort of thinking of the broader systems, because those are the invisible sort of skeletons that determine our actions. And I was listening to a podcast recently. I don't know, it's been a while, but this person's written this book about things that are invisible, and starts with quarks and atoms and cells and so on. So invisible in that sense. But by the end of the book, in the podcast, this author was talking, the host was talking with this author, that towards the end of the book, the chapter really about the structures that are invisible, which guide our actions in ways that we may not even realize it. It is like the little red button that pops up on Facebook. It might be Amazon recommendations. It may be tenure and promotion systems. It may be accreditation. I mean, those are hidden structures with incentives and ways of thinking that are built in, that are so baked in that we cannot see beyond them. When somebody had defined a worldview as something that sees everything except itself, a worldview doesn't see itself being one possible worldview, because by its very definition, a world is defining the entire world. And I wonder, in education, what are sort of these worldviews that we have taken on? And it seems to me that those individuals who are doing the kind of work, who we have been lucky to have as guests, how much more of their work would be if those systems were different, so that they wouldn't be fighting against it all the time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's no question in this. There's just a comment about it's individuals and systems, and we have to be looking at both. And that sort of has stood out to me over the weeks.
One of the things that you were saying about systems, technically, I'm just curious about why we are so eager to return to pre-pandemic systems when the pandemic disrupted the system. So that is what I've been just really curious to say. I mean, actually, I shouldn't, because people want the normal, and now suddenly after disruption, they think what we had was the normal. But if you look at there are a lot of at least elements of systems have been disrupted. And, just think about college, we got a lot more colleges which choose not to take in SAT. We got a lot of states who applied for a waiver not to do standardized, testing for their kids. So we got a lot of those things happen, but then people are returning to their normal. So I think that's really the challenge we have, is that when we had a chance to disrupt the system, right, but then the previous system becomes perfect. That's right. Really that's the issue.
Right. The nostalgia factor is there, right? Yeah. But I think that things are also a little complicated, because I mean, if you think about sort of why we have the SATs, ACTs, and the standardized testing, the idea was actually quite egalitarian to start with. The idea was that, this is the Confucian Chinese model, right? I mean, that you test, and then then it doesn't matter what your background is, your economic status, that won't matter. You'll, merit.
Meritocracy. Yeah.
Right. Now, we know that doesn't necessarily work that way. But what's also happening is in the colleges which are not using SATs, it's not that diversity has increased in any single form. So I think matters are a little more complicated than that. In all of these things, right? I mean, if equitable access is a
Oh,
challenge.
sure. No, Puna, I didn't mean to say that. I simply meant this overarching, overwhelming things were removed. Therefore, the system was reduced. I was not talking about how good or bad. I was just saying they're gone. Well, we're going to return them. So that's what I was worried.
No, I think it's largely nostalgia. It is also, everybody's tired and they want some kind of a normality, and then you go to what you thought was normal and you're like, okay, that's what it is, right? So no, I get that.
Yeah.
I like the idea of thinking about it at the systems level. And in teaching my courses, sometimes I wonder what on earth my students must think of me, because we come in week one and I say, actually, one of the big problems in education is that we're teaching wrong. We're teaching by telling and learning by listening. Okay, they get it. Next class, our motivation is all screwed up in education. We're using behavior modification when we should be thinking of students as lamps to be lit. Okay, got it. Teaching and motivation. Then I come in week 3 and say, well, our assessment systems are all screwed up, right? We're measuring what's easy rather than what's important. Okay, teaching, right? Motivation, assessment. What is coming next? Okay, leadership, right? Hey, command and control leadership rather than distributed. At that point, they probably think this guy he's trying to destroy everything we know about educational systems, because no matter what it is, he's saying that it's going in the wrong direction. And okay, so hopefully I'm convincing them that at least some of what I'm saying is correct. But I think the other thing that says is it's no wonder that we can't change education. Because if you somehow have a classification system for systems where you say dysfunction level 1 is one kind of process within the system is wrong. Dysfunction level 2 is 2 processes, but they reinforce each other in being wrong. Dysfunction level 3, dysfunction level 4, dysfunction level 5. What is education? Dysfunction level 7 or something? I mean, we are dealing with a hellishly difficult thing to change, because so many parts of it are broken and they're all reinforcing one another and being broken.
Well, I don't know, Chris, feel free to jump in, because I just want to respond to Chris. I don't know if you've noticed, I bet Kurt and Pune, you might have run into the same situation. We've all given a lot of keynote speeches. Every time you give to one audience, everybody asks what the other people will do. So if you're speaking to teachers, they will say, oh, well, when is the state going to get rid of the exam? When the leaders, if you're speaking to school leaders, they'll blame the state. If you're speaking to the state, they'll blame the teachers. So it's actually, we have a systemic atrophy that we always believe what we are doing is right. It's the others that will stop us. The parents don't want this. If we did this, parents would do this. If we did that, the government. In my view, is everybody can do something. Feel free to blame others, but we actually can do something. So I've always tried, in silver lining, I think we are identifying the people who did something innovative regardless. The others definitely, there's something wrong. They can always do something more, but we have to say, okay, yes, within this existing conditions, we still can do something. I think that's a message. That's what the silver lining kind of reinforces that message. Everybody can do something no matter where you are. I think that's the message. Kurt and Punya, you want to jump in?
Well, I've been thinking about a little different lines here, but back to the beginning with Chris's comment about people. And I'm looking ahead at the schedule and a few gaps that we have. And I wonder whether, we could tap into various people who know of those rising stars in the field. So this afternoon in my class, I was showing a lot of Edutopia videos, New Tech Highs on project-based learning and on reciprocal teaching and other things. And I was just totally amazed with the commitment of these teachers and principals across the country that Edutopia is spotlighting and highlighting and so forth. And I had Milton Shen, who used to be the executive director of Edutopia of the George Lucas Education Foundation.
He was actually a founding executive director of that. Yeah.
Right. So he just endorsed my book, and I wonder if I can go back to him and Susan Patrick, who was in charge of the NICOL, or International NICOL. She's now at the Aurora Institute. And Ed Gregert, who is part of IRN, who was the director of that. And these people who have a finger on a pulse on the talent out there. And I wonder if you would mind if I would contact those folks and ask for some nominations for future shows, just nominations, and run those by you. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, Milton is a good friend. Actually, we work a lot. I was just with him co-presenting at Asia Society. Well, another organization I think which we have ignored, which we shouldn't, is the Digital Promise. I don't know if you guys might know that it has a huge impact in the field. And also they have Barbara Means and Jeremy Rochelle. They're doing research. Right. That's another organization which we can bring to share with us. It's a nonprofit organization, what they were doing. And they were work with Verizon, with a lot of schools providing equipment, providing content. It's quite massive, so I can access them, have them to come into to share some broader things, as a large organization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we're connected to a lot of folks that can extend.
I was also thinking that with this new models of teacher education or teacher preparation, might be good to get some people from ASU, from the Next Education Workforce, Brent Madden, maybe our dean, for an episode. That might be fun.
We should, Punya, we should get a group of deans, to chat about this, let's think about that. But I thought, Punya, you want to talk a little bit about learning loss.
Okay, let's talk about learning loss. So the reason I've been sort of thinking about it, because I've been reading how, stuff you've been writing, others have been writing, that what do we mean when we say learning loss? What is lost? What is learning? That in this 1 year, we've had some of our guests, if I remember, Peter Gray, and, had spoken quite eloquently about like schools and how they prevent play and, exploration, which is sort of the foundation of how humans learn, and that there are a lot of opportunities. But at the same time, I've also been reading people, particularly coming out of India, who are speaking to 210 million children who have not been in school for the past 18 months. And so they did this huge study where they went and, they talked to the kids and did their usual, things that we as educators do. And what they're finding is even simple things, because you're looking at kids who are in very impoverished situations, sort of like what Kendra was talking about last week, where the only real place where being able to read and write and speak and, do basic arithmetic, like, number recognition, and what these guys call sort of the foundational sort of skills, without which, you can't do any higher order thinking or anything, right? And they're finding that children have actually fallen behind significantly. So, let's say if you go to who was a 4th grader, now should have been in 5th grade, that their learning is at the 3rd grade level. And at the scale of a nation, that is something that's really challenging. So I don't have a question here as much as that I have these two opposing things, both of which make sense to me. And I just felt that, that would be good for us to talk about it, because we have approached this in different ways in the show, but not necessarily with the perspective that I'm speaking of in the Indian context of children who are really falling behind. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the data there that 90% of kids that lost foundational abilities in language, in terms of recognizing numbers or adding 3 numbers. So.
Well, Punya, what you're talking about was very much like the traditional learning loss literature talks about summer learning loss. You have children going home for 2.5 months, they come back and they really have lost what they learned because there's no continuation. But right now, the learning loss, because of pandemic, people are trying to make what I call impossible things. So like, for example, you were not in school, you were in school, you were doing remote learning, whatever you do, they said, okay, we compare to the 4th grade standards, you might have lost this much, So they were calculating. There's another deep concern I have actually with learning loss literature is they're really just talking about literacy and numeracy. And then I was more worried about this is that governments will say, well, actually governments are doing this now to say, let's test the kids to say how much they've lost. That's what I saw the danger is. If you test the kids and you will find they were not as good, and then you will test them more. So you were just using different strategies to make it worse. What I think a different approach is not to measure, to test, to understand, is to accept children as where they are. We go through human horrible episodes of life all the time. What you can do is to meet where they are. If you gone through wars, we have seen schools been burned down, schools have all this. You just says, okay, let's accept the children as who they are. And also let's worry about other things because, imagine the US right now. The McKinsey report says, poor kids are lost a lot more than rich kids. So I said, okay, what are you going to do? You can't just test them. What you do is to say, okay, we find different ways to approach that. But then at the same time, we're forcing schools back the same way, because it's actually the schooling, the existing school structure that resulted a lot of the so-called disparities in learning loss. So how do we approach that? I think it's more of a different issue.
That is actually very helpful to me as I think about it, because learning loss is, if you're measuring it against some kind of an abstract yardstick, which was made up anyway.
Right.
So that's a really good point. So if we see it from the point of view of this is where kids are, we hope by the time they're 15, 17, 20 years old, they can do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't matter what happened in the past year. We just start from wherever we are.
Right. Yeah. But right now, I don't know about India. Really, like in China, actually, it's a good example. Like, for example, you have one province. Suddenly, they have this pandemic. They have to shut down schools, especially for the kids. Imagine they're already graduating. They're going to take the college entrance exam as other kids. So there may be true challenges for that because that's selecting. But if you were, let's say, 1st grade or 2nd grade, that pressure might be quite different. It's what another worry is really this idea. Now the federal government is putting a lot of money into making up literacy and numeracy. So many schools have that money. But when you have that money, if you are not taking care of the other things, that's not going to help because it has not helped. Remember all the policies, before it hasn't helped. So I doubt it would help. I actually I'm working with a student from the University of Louisville or somewhere. He found the article. So he's done a lot of analysis of all the 55 newspaper articles on learning loss. And they were talking about where's the data? And what's the approach? It's basically a deficit-driven model to say, well, you don't have this. But what about other things that could have developed? And I'm not talking about India because I really don't know the India situation at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an element of privilege that's built into thinking about that children have had very rich experiences outside of school during the pandemic. There's an element of privilege there, which I think makes sense in the maybe the US context, or maybe in certain aspects of the US context, maybe not even all. If you are a single parent with like 3 kids and doing 2 jobs, and you are regarded as a frontline worker, of course, given no protection financially or anything, but you just have to go into work, the chances that children are gaining valuable experience may or may not be true, right? It's different if you are in a well-positioned place, financially and otherwise. That's a different story, right? I mean, you have learning pods, you have all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I mean, this sort of 2 pieces of these things were bumping themselves in my head.
Well, we should get someone, a group of people to talk about this. Right now, it's superintendents, principals, because one of the things I've always wondered, for example, long vacation versus short vacation. I said, it depends. People use it, let's have longer school days. Longer school days may be very helpful for people who don't have access to resources at home. But then that might be worse. I mean, for schooling, it might be worse for rich kids who have access to other things.
Right.
So that's the kind of situation, right? I mean, like, some rich kids, they can go travel globally, they can go to museums, they can go to dancing clubs, will be very different. So I think a lot of times our view of one view to apply to all children can be quite problematic.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, Kurt, Chris, thoughts?
I started my course with Paul Kim's episodes way back when, because his original work was with kids who were totally marginalized, and it was giving them a low-end feature phone and a jump rope that you could use to charge the phone after you ran out of power from the last time you used the jump rope. And so it was a system that didn't say, how do we build a school? How do we build a classroom? Even though certainly his work has encouraged that. It's what can you give kids that's below that threshold that's still helpful? And I think we also see an opportunity that's largely unrealized in families. So most parents really don't have any idea how to teach their children to read or to build their literacy. The 100-year-old ideas that are being passed along do not accord with modern knowledge. And so when the schools and the classrooms aren't available, the parents throw up their hands and they either say, well, I have no idea how to help my child, or they do something to help their child that in fact is not optimally helpful, but it's the best that they know. So, there's a lot of talk now about risk mitigation. The pandemic has kind of taught us that systems that we thought were really strong and resilient were actually one-dimensional and brittle. And I think that's true for learning in the society. We don't have backup systems like the ones that Paul Kim came up with. We don't have backup systems with families understanding something about modern knowledge about the mind and learning. And so if the school isn't working, then the kids are just out of luck.
I was just joking that, speaking of one-dimensional systems, especially our presidential election system, has been shown to be troubled in many ways. So it's not just schools right now. Kurt, I don't know if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, just when you start talking about the ideas of Paul Kim, and they are fantastic, and we start thinking about some of the other people that we brought in that also touch upon access issue and diversity issues and fairness or equity. And I started thinking about Stephen Hipple for some reason. If it didn't work, he would find a way to operationalize it and get it to work. We've had some people in who have done amazing things that all in some ways connect to one another. And if we find a way to connect this or these videos, and we tried tagging the videos last year at one point, we weren't that successful in getting that done, but if we can find a way to do that, we might be able to create some kind of themes or tracks for people to watch the different episodes in, and maybe there's activities that we suggest, and instructors who take advantage of such assignments that we create, we can give them Silver Lining for Learning certificates, class certificates, or instructor certificates. I don't know, that's just another idea. The other thing I've been thinking about as we've been talking is how or can we influence graduate students and their mindsets, and can we provide at some point in the shows reminders to graduate students or to undergraduate students who are in this field that, hey, these people are all contactable. Their bio is there. Their email is there. Just reach out to them, and or we'd be happy to connect you to them if you reach out to one of us. I think we could go one step beyond just bringing people in, recording them, and making those videos available. The other steps could be, as I said, some kind of certificate related to the use of these videos, some kind of network within, maybe we create a LinkedIn network of Silver Lining for Learning, of people who have been on the show, join a special network or club. We share resources within that. I'm not a big user of LinkedIn. Chris, you're more of a user, but there might be a way to create a community that when people are on the show, you might suggest to them to join our LinkedIn community, and to what degree you want, you can add to it and learn from it. But that
So
might.
Kurt, you want to share our therapeutic sessions with the broader groups of people? That's what you're thinking about. Okay, depersonalize it. But I think there's one more thing I want to say. I know Chris wants to say something. Is that Punya has always had this idea of broaden our audience. We need the philosophers, historians, anthropologists, sociologists, because if you're so far, Paul Kim is a great example. I'm really interested in people who wants to invent education or reinvent education in a different way. That's why the Global Online Academy was interesting. I think, so we want people to say, okay, can we reimagine education? I've recently been asked, for example, to serve on the NANSET Commission for Youth Health. And they've always been medical people. So they never had. So they want education people to say, just tell us, how do we work with schools even? What happens? I say, well, schools, make kids unhappy anyway. But that's a different story. So they are reaching out to different kind of people. I think we can reach out to other people. Peter Gray is a good example. Someone who is outside, so something. So I think that is something we can think about. And we're going to have Tony Wagner on October 2nd, which will bring a different kind of education. So maybe we can think about education without schooling, because right now we have classrooms, schools, systems, we have all this. So could we reimagine a different way, especially with Paul Kim? I'm also thinking of Punya. You have 200 million kids. Can we not build schools? Can we build learning centers for them? Can we redo some of those things? So anyway, that's the kind of this I would like to see change and happen. Maybe in the future, we can bring some people like that. Go ahead, Punya or Chris.
Yeah, building on that quickly. Ezra Klein had this philosopher of technology on the show. I would love to get this person. His name is Sakasas. And he has this thing called for questions concerning technology. He's sort of like a Neil Postman-like thinker. And I think he would bring a different array of topics into this question around technology. Might be interesting to have somebody like that. So I think maybe we need to widen our scope in some way to get people who are somewhat outside of the field, but help us think, and might make some really interesting episodes.
I like that. And I have been thinking about what you do with big data, and we're getting to the point with 75 hours that we're starting to have big data and keep building it. I don't know if you've seen these simulated conversation systems where, for example, you can have a simulated conversation with Albert Einstein and you ask a question and then it shows some kind of a video clip or something he wrote or some other utterance that he came up with that relates to the question. Then you ask another question. They're not very good because the person wasn't trying to answer your question. You're just pulling bits and pieces from the corpus of what's known about them. But the concept is an interesting one.
I've been thinking about that concept for a while, Chris. I'm sorry to interrupt. They've done this with Holocaust survivors and asked them specific questions so they can answer. So for recent history, you can do that. For people who've already passed away, then no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, not at all. I think that actually we did ask people questions, and they were responding to questions. And what we're not doing is linking those questions across episodes. Now, we don't have the resources to do this, but wouldn't it be interesting to have a simulated dialogue system where, for example, somebody could say, kids just seem so unmotivated to learn. What can we do about that? And then we had 4 clips from SLL guests that were 2 minutes each that we edited in to talk about that. And then somebody else says, well, whatever. I think that we could actually develop a kind of a simulated dialogue system that then we could feed. Punya, your point is we figure out where the gaps are, and then we start to invite guests that speak to the gaps.
Chris, do you have students who are able to do that, or Kurt or Punya?
Yeah,
we'd have to get money. I mean, a lot of money, really. But it would be an interesting, you would think that an ed tech company would be interested in sponsoring something like that.
Punya or Kurt, I thought you guys were.
No, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. I've heard, I think, vaguely of it, but I don't know much about it to know how it works. But I want to go back. I just put this link to this Ezra Klein interview. So take a look at it when you get a chance. But I think getting some people like that who can push us to think about education or something differently. It'll be great. I know, Chris, you're doing a series around AI, right? At some point.
It's on my to-do list in the top 5 to write the heads of the 3 AI centers and see if I can schedule them for November and December, 1 week for each, just to talk about what they see the frontiers in AI being. And I think that would be really interesting. I hope I can pull that off.
Where are the 3 main centers? Is North Carolina and
well, all the centers are distributed across multiple institutions, but the lead for this center that was funded last year is at the University of Colorado Boulder, and the lead for the 2 that were funded this year, one is at Georgia Tech and one is at North Carolina State University.
Right. Yeah, we've got a piece of that here at Indiana. We're one of the partners on that.
So when you're working on the AI piece, I think Punya, you know the philosophy group quite well. And I was just skimming through your NY article. I think it's just interesting to get somebody from outside education to talk about it, to talk about education from their angle.
Right.
Another area I think we need help is some deep psychologists who understands some kind of relationship with education, like Peter Gray, for example, he's took a different approach, just of course. So, but I think psychologists play a very big role, right now on the learning process. I don't know if the word is still there, the phrase learning sciences, is that's still being used?
Of course.
Oh,
yeah.
really? Okay.
I was kicked out of that department. That's why I'm over in instructional technology. They telling me I'm not even qualified to teach the courses I created, but that's another story because I don't go to their conferences, so I can't.
Learning sciences, right?
Yeah, the learning science folks.
There is some debate about whether it's a community or a cult. Let me put it that way.
Well, now we can't have them anymore. Well, I don't know how many universities have a learning sciences, degree, but we know Northwestern. I don't know if Northwestern still has it, Do you guys have learning sciences, Punya?
I think we have a master's degree.
Learning sciences?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. But
anyway,
anyway,
one of the bigger ones.
I've always felt that there is this, the German Democratic Republic, GDR in the good old day. If it had democracy in its title, then you knew it was not democratic. So artificial intelligence or intelligence, if it has intelligence in its title, it doesn't have it. So if you're learning sciences, then you're not a science, So that's my way of looking at, like, you always, your own weakness and you put that in your title, hoping that you patch it up.
You're talking about the People's Republic of China.
There you go. That's a good example. That's
why it's called United States of America. It's never united, right? That's the problem. You're never united. Okay.
Actually, I have a question about our upcoming episodes. We have Tanya Jostin and Nicole Weber next week. We have Ted and Tony the week after that. We have a blank after that.
Well, let's find someone.
Yeah. I told Chris I might contact Mahabali in Egypt. She's done a lot in diversity, equity, inclusion, and she's now been doing a lot of speaking around about emotional support for online learning. So that's
I can check. Kurt, have you started that, or should I check my dean?
Go ahead and check your dean. Yeah.
All right. Let me check with Carol. I'm meeting her Monday. So if we can do.
Do you want her? Do you want another dean, or just do you want her? I mean,
I think what we could do is we could get Carol and Brent. So Carol's vision about this whole next education workforce and reimagining education, that's there. And Brent is the director who leads that work.
Okay.
So between them, that might be an interesting one. Or I could see if we could get some of Mesa Public Schools has committed that, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but 80% of their schools are going to have this sort of multiple teachers in classrooms kind of a model. So maybe we can see if we can get somebody from Mesa.
Sure.
So let me talk to Carol. She will help us think it through. I think that'll be fun.
I think the episodes are great where you have an innovator, but then you also have somebody who's trying to apply their ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, Brent is sort of where the rubber hits the road in some way, at least from like from the teachers college side. But let me see. I mean, maybe we can get a couple, Carol would be great because it's kind of interesting to watch how sort of she has sort of modified and changed her vision, but it's held true to certain core things and how it's sort of influencing the work that we do as a college. It's kind of an interesting story there in and of itself.
Well, another episode I would like to do, actually, Pune, is invite another of your colleagues, because actually I want Ron Beghetto and I, we are finishing editing this journal on democratizing creativity. And it's a journal of a lot of really most recent research, I think, on creativity education and democratizing that, especially with the indigenous and African American groups. So I'd like to, him and I, we can talk about that issue. I think would be good. It's a very good summary.
Why don't we do this? Let me talk to Carol. If Carol doesn't work out, I know Ron would be easier to land. So yeah, that episode we can make Ron and you, or Ron and whoever else you want to do. But let me talk to Carol.
Okay.
I should have an answer. I'll message her today
Yeah.
and see if
So
she's.
so we got about 5 minutes. I want to end this with Chris. Again, you're the birthday boy, and I want you really say something that's really, I don't know, so impactful. Only that happens on a birthday. What would that be?
Profound.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no pressure,
something.
right?
No pressure.
Yeah.
I want to say that if somebody had told me a year and a half ago when we started that we would still have material after 75 episodes, I would have said no. I would have said not if we have a high standard for what the innovations are. You know, Mark Twain once was asked, somebody in one of his audiences of about 50 remarked that they were all intelligent people here. And Twain said, there aren't that many intelligent people in the whole world. Facetiously, but with with an edge on it. I am so encouraged by the fact that we've got 75 and we're still finding people, and when we find those, we're going to find more people. I really think that there's this well of talent that's unrecognized, talent, dedication, innovation, and I'm so happy we're tapping it. That's my inspirational thought for the day.
Well, thanks, Chris. I have to tell you something. I never thought we were watched by many people, but I've been very surprised. A lot of people email me and talk to me and say, hey, you're doing a silver lining thing. So I couldn't believe, after a year and a half, people are paying attention to this. I know you're using this for courses, but really people began to pay attention. So go ahead, Punya.
I'll tell you this. Because I upload the videos and all that, so I can see how many views videos are getting. Our videos are steadily getting watched. It's kind of interesting to see. I thought it'll have like 10 views. No, there'll be like 3. And the further back in time and go, the more views those videos have. So people are finding them, watching the old ones, and the newer ones clearly, are sort of picking up, but they're consistently getting views. So it's surprising to me.
The tipping point is going to be when people start contacting us and saying, people are asking me why I'm not good enough to be on Silver Lining for Learning. Can you put me on? That's going to be when we hit the tipping point.
I need to introduce the next show, guys. I'm sorry,
go ahead.
This has been a great conversation that we've all had, but I want to get us thinking about next week, because we have 2 guests coming with Chris and my ties, because they both have Wisconsin backgrounds and experiences. Tanya Jolston is at UW Milwaukee, and Chris and I both grew up there. She's a senior scientist, director of digital learning research and development, co-PI and the co-director of the National Research Center on Distance Education for the whole United States. And she's got a blended learning report that's just come out related to blended planning for it and the research guide behind it. And now a new one, a second one's going to be appearing soon, and both with Nicole Weber, the Associate Vice President of the Online Learning Consortium. The second one's going to be for administrators and such. So we're going to have 2 great people, and we still have a minute. And so before we go, I need to share my screen here. And if I can get this on the screen, I guess that won't do. I'm going to stop that share. So it's Chris's picture. We'll show that later. If I can find my slides. There we go. A little happy birthday tribute to Chris Stede. And we probably have one more quick one to show here, Chris. And do a little happy birthday. I hope you can hear me.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chris. Happy birthday.
rule now that hosts have to publicly declare when their birthday is. So that we
And
can
So,
do
my
this
friends,
for
it is with
everybody,
an
not just for
Oktoberfest
me.
beer for Kurt, a Stimmy beer for Punya, and a West Coast IPA for my friend Young Zhao on the West Coast, all from the same Switchyard Brewery. And for our friend who's off on a tangent, every week I have a beer for him from Function Brewery, a real big beer for you waiting here. So cheers on your birthday. This one's open. And that's how we end show 75.